Hello everybody and welcome once again to a new video. This is the second in my series. I'll be trying to do more of these through the week, 3 or 4 times a week. There's a lot of news coming out right now, so there's a lot to cover. So let's get right into it. To start, let's just cover the game real quick. There's not much to say about that. Defensively, organizationally, it was terrible. Pep pretty much figured out the weaknesses in the side and exposed them over and over and over again, especially as the second half went along, to where we basically could do nothing. In some ways, this was a bit of a reverting back to type. How things have gone for the beginning of the year, the weaknesses we've had, the problems we've had. Not much progress has actually happened. Not much has actually changed. We went back to a bit of a 4-2-4 system, which just doesn't work for us. But, that doesn't mean it's on Ralf, the game itself. We just don't have the personnel to go toe-to-toe with City, and that's pretty clear. So, anyways, the season is pretty much as a wash when it comes to these big clubs and these big games. We know we're not going to beat them. It is what it is. I don't want to dwell on it too much for the purpose of this video, so let's move on. There's a lot to talk about on the manager situation that I want to cover. Obviously, there's been a ton of news recently, and I'd like to say why, what's going on, and why it's a bit of a complicated situation to report and to cover in general. So here's the thing. This is not an opinion. Pochettino had been first and has been first and is still basically identified from the football structure within the club as being first. And I outlined who makes the decisions in an article, but there's a lot of people involved in this decision making, from scouts, analysts to directors and all of that. There's probably 5 or 6 main people who report to Fletcher and Murtaugh on this to determine who would be the best fit for the club, and Pochettino was identified as the first choice. There's also a lot of willingness from his side. I'm not trying to be biased about this, I'm really just giving the exact information, but I want to explain what's going on here. There's a lot of people who thought he would be the best, and that Ten Hag would have problems working within the structure of the club. Not that he isn't a great coach, not that he isn't a great manager, not that his ideas don't work, but that he might have some problems working within the structure of the club. And one other factor is that he might not get the time necessary to do what he needs to do to build the club up. Given everything that's gone on, a decade of failure, 5 years no trophies. How much longer do the people in the football area think they could get away with the next manager without us winning something? There is a little bit of a thought process of we need some immediate improvement and some immediate results next season, and that it's going to be hard to keep any manager in a job without that, and that Ten Hag style might take a bit longer, maybe. If you look back in November, when we sacked Ollie in the first place, there was very little on Ten Hag at that time. There's reports from Luckhurst and Manchester Evening News and other places that Pochettino was the first choice, that we had tried to get him, that it was rebuffed, but that we were confident of appointing him at the end of the season. Now, he was first. That was before Ragnick came in. There's a bit of a narrative starting to form now that this has changed, in part because there's a perceived difficulty in bringing in Pochettino from PSG, that it might be expensive and all of that. That's somewhat of the narrative that's forming. And now that Ten Hag is viewed as an excellent coach and they could bring him in as an alternate, that's a bit of the narrative forming. But here's where it stands as of now. There have been no direct contacts with Ten Hag himself. The talks have been directly to his representatives. That much I can be sure of. They have been to his representatives. We haven't spoken with him yet. This was also reported by Simon Stone. He just came out with a report stating that there haven't been direct contacts on this, and that is a fact. The big issue right now is that with the Champions League tie up in the air for us, for PSG, and for Ajax, all very tight. It's even for Ajax, it's even for United, and PSG are up 1-0 on Madrid. There's a lot still in flux there, a lot that could change, and a lot that could delay decision making. So we're going to have to see what happens there. But David Ornstein indicated that we wanted to get this figured out in the next few weeks, and I think the club does. It's a tricky situation. I've heard things that are practically straight from the horse's mouth on Pochettino that would indicate why I've been so much saying that it's likely to be him. But I'm very much open to the possibility that this person where this came from, which is extremely directly involved, could be wrong. It happens. It happens with signings. It happens with managers. It happens with agents. This happens where they could be not necessarily wrong, but maybe they think the situation is a little bit further along than it is. Maybe that's the case. I can only present what I've heard and what I've been told. I'm not going to make something up and claim that I've had knowledge of it all along. The only thing I knew that was very much a first choice, and that we would have talks with Ten Hag and his representatives, and now we have had those talks with his representatives, and they are set to continue. So there's some reasons why I've been so sure of Pochettino. We'll see if the person and where that information came from misassessed the situation or not. But that's going to come out over the next few weeks as things move forward. And I will be working on and getting some more information from some very good areas on exactly what's happening, especially on the Ten Hag side soon, because I really want to present an accurate situation as best as possible. And it's very complicated at the moment. It's definitely changing on a daily basis. And that the situation is kind of fluid would be a good description of the matter. One thing I have heard, though, like I mentioned, Ten Hag would take a bit of time to implement his style in. The club are aware of this. That's one of their concerns, that they don't necessarily have the structure set up to do this for him and to allow that to happen. However, I have heard today that Ralf is pushing for, essentially one of the big reasons that makes Ten Hag possible, is Ralf is pushing for the next manager to get 3 years minimum. And I mean, not just a 3-year contract, but the fact of the matter is that they should get 3 years without any consideration of sacking them. The next manager, whoever it is, that they get 3 years to really just put things in place and have the time to do exactly what they want to do. If that were the case, it's good for Pochettino, but it's also very, very good for making the possibility of Ten Hag viable, that he would be given the time to do it, because it's not a one-season process with Ten Hag. Pochettino might be able to come in and get a bit more out of our players right now based on fit and all of that. All of them need time, but if there was a guarantee of 3 years, it would probably make the race even a bit more open for the manager situation and give Ten Hag a bit of flexibility. But let's move on from that, because all of this just ties into kind of the player things that are coming out today as well that I want to talk about. I heard as well regarding Ragnick that he's a bit livid essentially with a lot of the players and has expressed this, and this isn't the first time I've heard this, but that he has some real problems and wants a real clear out with a lot of the players. And part of the challenge is he knows we have to retain value on some of the players that are at the club right now that aren't going for free. He has about 11 players that he wants gone, from what I understand, including all the free agents as well as a few others that he wants to move along and sell. One of his goals would be to bring in a few youth players, Hannibal Mejbri, Mengi, and Garner back into the club, to get them some minutes next season and actually involved in the first team, replacing some of these players who are leaving. So we're not trying to sign 8, 10 players. That's not feasible and it's not going to happen. I've also been told that this is really a lot of what Fletcher is there to do and what Fletcher's job is about, why he's down in the dugout, why he's there on the pitch, why he's working directly hand in hand with Ralf and the players, and apparently he's developing a good relationship with Ragnick on this. But essentially what he's working with Ralf on as the technical director is to evaluate the players, evaluate the personnel, and tie them into the strategy of the club. So he's working to do that and figure out who should go, who should stay, who would fit in with the plans that they're going moving forward, and essentially presenting all of this for the summer plans in terms of sales, in terms of releases, in terms of new contracts, and all of that. And that's what Fletcher is putting together. That's why he's down there. It's more like a fact-finding mission with the players, with the personnel, with all of that, which is something desperately needed, a brand new evaluation of the club, which is a big part of what Ragnick wanted to put in place. So let's talk about a couple of people real quick, because there's some news that's come out today. First, Marcus Rashford, talking about him evaluating his future. This is a really messy situation. I can say this. From what I understand, there's no way he's leaving right now. It's not that he actually wants to leave the club or anything like that. And I don't believe that there's any chance that he will. But he's had some challenges. From his perspective, a lot of our players have struggled this season. For about 2 years, Rashford played through some pretty bad injuries. The floating bone in his foot, a dislocated shoulder, and he played with those things under Ollie because we didn't have a lot of options and because he was trying essentially to help us win something. He was very productive in 1920 with a lot of injuries. He was actually very productive last season too, even though it tailed off towards the end of the year as he got tired and as those injuries really kicked in. he hasn't come back quite the same, but I think there is a little bit of disillusionment in that he worked so hard to do that and was really fighting for Ollie and fighting for the club and fighting to win something. Didn't happen. We didn't win anything. Ollie got sacked. Things fell apart. And it's definitely shaken, his mental perspective as a young player who's only experienced Manchester United. He does have concerns about having been essentially batted around through all the positions while he's had these injuries, while he's done what he can, and not been able to lock down a stable position at the club on the left rather than on the right, which you've seen from Paul Hurst mentioning that in his story, and I think I've mentioned that too. So I'm not giving him a pass for going to the media for any of the stories coming up, but there are some valid concerns that don't just relate to Ragnick, but a lot of the mistakes over the last 12 months under Ollie. Eric Bailly, as I mentioned in some posts earlier, wants to leave. He also feels that he's not been given the minutes he was due, and it would just be better for all parties involved for him to go, and he's the likely CB replacement. If a signing is made at center back, it's replacing him when he leaves. And a lot of these issues are just down to the chop and change of managers. Chop and change of ideas, chop and change of all of that. A lot of the attitudes at the club stink recently. They're not good. But any manager is going to have to come in and be very strong. And we need to clear out, and we need to kind of set a new course and stick to it moving forward. It's desperately needed at the club, and the next manager is going to have to be very strong and be backed by a structure that supports them completely. Whether you agree or not, in the past, Jose getting undermined in situations with Martial and Pogba doesn't work. We can't do that anymore. Whatever the manager decides, including Ragnick, including the next person, it needs to be backed fully if we're going to sort this out and get the discipline in with these players. And so that is also a factor in the manager's decision, that they need somebody who's strong to come in and take hold of this and really kind of clean things out and set a new course for the club moving forward. So now let's move on to some player transfers and news. Darwin Nunez, this information was confirmed by Jonathan Schrager on Twitter the other day, that there's a meeting planned with him and his representative, who's also the representative of Pellistri. United like him. They're interested. They've done some high-level scouting of him. There are other clubs involved, especially Atletico Madrid, potentially Inter Milan, and it would be good for the club to move quickly in kind of formalizing that interest and looking to make an offer, because the young striker thing is a number one priority this summer, with a sincere possibility that Ronaldo leaves regardless of the Champions League situation. I don't know if that's going to happen, but there is some hint that it will. The next one, Anthony Martial. He could definitely leave, but if Pochettino comes in, just consider it. He's expected to return for the club. It's been reported that Sevilla can't afford his wages, and that would have some difficulty creating a permanent transfer. So it'd have to be negotiated, but if Pochettino comes in, I have heard that he may find a use for him, and then he may like him. Okay, so keep an eye on that. A random name that I've heard here recently that was passed along to me, if Ten Hag comes in as well, is to keep an eye on that young right back that he has at Ajax, Devin Renshi, I think is the name, Devin Renshi. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that exactly. I never heard it before. Apparently he's like a prodigy in Ajax, and someone Ten Hag really loves, who would like to bring in. If that happens, you'd probably see someone like Dalot or Wan-Bissaka moving on. But think about that and just keep that name in mind. Otherwise, there's not a ton of new news. Declan Rice remains the main target for the midfield. I wouldn't think too much on the Rudiger links at center back at the moment, but think with potentially someone like Araujo from Barcelona, who is a real target, and more names may come up once this manager situation is finalized, especially at center back. So let's see what happens there. Essentially what the club want to do right now, I wanted to talk about the budget as the final thing. There was a story about how there's only 80 million budget with Champions League, 50 million without. I doubt that. I don't believe it. It's not really how the club operates. I put out an article showing how much we spend, how much we usually spend, and all of the detail. The only hint of that being true is it may be where we aim to get to, and maybe where the club aims to end up with their net spend this summer is 80 million. What they want to do is clear out all those free agents. They want to get a striker. They want to get a defensive midfielder. And then they want to sell some players like potentially Tony Martial, Donny van de Beek, Eric Bailly, and Nemanja Matic perhaps, and a few others, potentially a right back. And if that can be done, then the budget may end up being 80 million when you factor all the spending in with some clever spending and some clever sales. But I don't believe it's the other way around. I don't think they'll get to buy one player for 80 million and then say, "Oh, we're done. Can't do anything else until we sell 5 people." No. They're going to go out and get their major targets, and then they're going to look to sell to bring that budget back down to earth. So rather than waiting for sales to buy, it'll probably be the opposite. Get some major targets in, and then work the sales back down to 80 million. So that's what I see happening. That's what I've heard there. Okay, so that covers all the latest news today. I will be doing another video soon. There will be an article coming out with a bit more detail on the whole Ten Hag situation as I get some very good information on this and we try to really explain the whole situation. Otherwise, let's see what happens soon. I will put another video out later this week. If you like this one, make sure to like, subscribe, comment any questions, feedback, or anything you have. And we'll see you again soon.